Filmmaker Richard Linklater helped spark the emergence of independent film in the 1990s with Slacker, sharply drawn movies about young people, dazed and confused before sunrise in suburbia followed. His latest film, The Newton Boys, is a bit of a shift. Set in the 1920s, it tells the true story of four Texas brothers who became the most successful bank robbers of their day. Joining me now, Richard Linklater, who was also recently honored with a retrospective at the American Museum of the Moving Image, and I'm pleased to have him here. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me about the Newton Boys, because I didn't know anything about them until your movie.
Yeah, no, I had never heard of them until 4 years ago. I read an article in Smithsonian Magazine by a man who became my co-writer, Claude Stanish, who actually knew him. And in the 70s, he met him. The Newtons were old men, Joe and Willis Newton. And he chronicled their story and kind of told, the story of their lives. And it's fascinating. And they're obscure characters to history because they really got away with it. They didn't kill people. They never captured the public imagination. I think any outlaw's goal is to get away with it, not be known. And so they were really successful.
So they were good at it.
But their numbers are impressive. 80 banks, 6 trains, ton of money. Really, statistically much more successful than any outlaw you've heard of. In the notorious ones we grew up.
Why were they successful?
Sheer numbers. I mean, their methods, why were they successful?
Yeah, well, why were they not caught like almost everybody else is eventually caught?
They were really smart about it. They would go in, usually in winter, in the middle of the night, nitroglycerin in the safes, blow up the safes. It was pretty easy. The technology was pretty primitive in that day. So they would nitroglycerin the safes and take off. And they never wanted to hurt, they never killed anyone, so they didn't want to hurt people. So
they just were there because that's where the money was.
Businessmen. Willis Newton saw himself as a businessman.
Yeah. How much money did they get in total?
Oh, well, one train robbery. The last part of the movie is the great train robbery. It's the biggest train robbery in U.S. history. Is in June of 24. They got $3 million in one job, which today is over 70. So impressive amounts of big money, definitely. But I think in all their other jobs, it's like 14,000 here, 6,000 there, 20,000 there, 80,000 there. And back then, the average income was $1,300 a year, so you can see what kind of, it's a lot of money.
When you saw the article, were you looking for a film to make, or did it just jump out at you as something that intrigued you, and therefore the second thought was maybe a movie? Right.
Well, as a filmmaker, I kind of look at the whole world as a potential movie. Anything that happens to me, anything I hear. But when I saw this story, I guess I'd always, as a Texan, I always knew I would someday do a Western or something to do with the real roots of Texas. That's a part of me, too. I just haven't dealt with it cinematically. When I read the Newton story, that just jumped out at me. It's like, this was like discovering gold. I mean, this was like a great American story that hadn't been told.
So you ring up the author and say, let's talk.
Yeah, me and my producer and co-producer, we went down there and we met with Claude. And he liked the fact that I didn't want to change it. Hollywood had approached him over the years. He was the executor of Willis's story. But a lot of people had approached him
over the years.
Over the last 20, 25 years. But they always wanted to change it. Let's make it a cops and robbers. What happens, that's all kind of boring. They just rob these banks. Let's get the Texas Rangers in here and make something different out of it. But I think he liked the fact that I wanted to tell the truth, the exact story. I thought it was so fascinating. I didn't want to deviate from the facts.
What was it? So what was it that made it fascinating for you? I mean, what was it that you thought this is compelling as a movie?
Well,
the fact they got away with it, the fact that...
Well, I thought they were, in a really corrupt time in American history, which the 20s definitely were. I think they, I like where they came from, personally. There were these poor kids from West Texas, and pretty soon they're dealing with gangsters in Chicago, in 1924. Between Westerns and gangster films, they sort of traversed a lot of interesting territory at a really interesting time in history. But I just like them personally.
You had a lot more money to work with, too. $27 million this time.
But they were the kind of outlaws I think we would all be if we had to be outlaws. If we wanted to cross that line into the world of crime, they just wanted the money. They were very professional about it. They didn't want to hurt people. I think that's who hasn't fantasized about being some kind of criminal.
Tell me about the casting.
Oh, it's a wonderful cast. I got all my first choices. A few I'd worked with before. Matthew McConaughey plays Willis Newton, who's sort of the driven. He's the ambitious one. He kind of pulls his brothers into it. He's sort of lying and manipulating to everyone around him to get what he wants. So that's kind of the core of the movie. He's this driven personality who was sent to prison for something he didn't do when he was pretty young. And so he gets out of prison and he sees this corrupt society around him, and he just it's time for him to get a little payback. So his brothers, who are played by Ethan Hawke, plays Jess Newton, Vince D'Onofrio plays Doc, and Skeet Ulrich plays the younger brother, Joe. Yeah. And then there's a nitroglycerin expert who's a friend who Willis hooks up with. His name is Brent Glasscock.
Roll tape. Here is an excerpt.
You done yet?
I'm just giving this fella my opinion of this new Volstead prohibition business.
You ain't any less of a drunk now than you was when hooch was legal.
Well, that's exactly my point now. That particular law ain't really doing its job now, is it?
Go, Jeff.
You got a wife?
Mm-hmm.
You got kids? Mm-hmm. All right. There you go. Now, if I get arrested, you've got to bail me out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, all right. Have a good night.
You said somewhere that you cast actors that are the characters. True here?
In a way. Although I think these actors are so good, they could have played other parts, but an actor has to kind of turn up this knob and turn this one down. Ethan Hawke's performance in this is very different than I think what most people have seen him. He's kind of the, he's just a real lighthearted guy like we just saw in that scene. He drinks a lot. He's like the fun guy, and Matthew's the real driven guy. Well, you could have flipped those guys, or Skeet Ulrich could have played maybe Jess, but I think they're all such good actors. But you know them personally, and you bring out parts of themselves that maybe they're not even used to expressing.
But you must have a great eye for character, because if you look at the people who you cast in Dazed and Confused, and the people that you didn't cast too, who went on to do other great things, I mean, what is it you look for? What is it you think about when you think about casting?
All I think of, when I write or when I have a movie to do, I don't have it's not that specific. I'm really looking for just interesting people, and I can easily fit an interesting personality into my conception of the role. But you know him when you meet him. Like on this film, I met Dwight Yoakam. I ended up talking to him for an hour one time, and I was just like, he's just a really fascinating guy. I liked him. I wanted him on board. I wanted him part of the team. So I offered him the part of Brent Glasscock, who's sort of the fifth brother. He's very different than the brothers, but he's part of the group. So it's just interesting personalities.
Was this after Sling Blade or before?
I hadn't seen Sling Blade when I first
thought about Dwight.
Met him, and then I saw Sling Blade, and I said, oh, he's a different guy. He's a great actor. And then he couldn't be more different than Sling Blade and Newton Boys. He's a completely different guy, very serious actor.
Why did you, with all of the sort of the notion of how much you love music and from growing up and influence it had on you, why movies rather than music?
Well, I wasn't a musician or anything.
Music was listened to it.
Yeah, but everybody does. I think music's a big part of a lot of our lives, but I think it was more of a visual thing. I like films, I like stories. I was always a writer, writing plays and a lot of short stories. And it took me a while to discover cinema. I mean, I grew up in Huntsville, Texas, so it wasn't something I thought I could do for a living, but college age and beyond, I started getting interested in it.
Huntsville, Texas is defined by the fact that the state prison is there, isn't it?
Yeah, which is interesting. I mean, to me, Newton Boys is really personal in that way, because I like the justification of crime. I used to go visit guys in prison just to talk to them, and
you would go visit them in prison.
Yeah, just
guys
as a,
that you
as a
knew,
teenager.
or
no, just my mom was big into prison reform at the time, and she would know some inmates, and sometimes I'd just go visit them because they want visitors. They're bored, but they all have a justification. Yeah, I killed them, but and Matthew, his justification in this movie is, we're just little thieves stealing from the big thieves. If you think they're corrupt, then you have no problem taking from them. It's just, I like the mentality of the outlaw.
Here it is.
Now, and that's who takes the loss, and hell, they're the biggest crooks of them all. We are just little thieves stealing from the big thieves.
They did it in part because of the money and the business of it, but also because it was a kind of, it was a rush. It was a thrill.
I think so, yeah. I mean, they wanted the money and it was a business, but I tried to capture some of the spirit in the movie, I think, of the fun they had doing it.
What kinds of films do you want to make from here on out?
Gosh, it's kind of one film at a time, but I like doing the Newton Boys. It was a true story, and trying to make a true story work as a film is a real challenge, because real life, and if you stick to the facts, is kind of a messy thing. There's a lot of things that happen in the movie we couldn't have thought up. They're kind of outrageous. They're not realistic, but that's life, and the interrelations between the people, like Willis and Louise's relationship. She didn't know he was a bank robber for 2 years, but that's the fact. So I kind of like true stories.
And then when she found out, she tried to get him to stop.
Yeah, she wasn't happy about it, but she already loved him. It was too late, So, I like true stories. So there's a few things I'm working on that are trying to tell true stories.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's fun.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.